Thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. 2 years ago, I uploaded this video, where I went biome by biome and used 5 different metrics to try and figure out which one was best for building a base. I liked that video and it was a lot of fun to make, but it always had one big problem. Biomes are not uniform places by any means, and a conventionally good biome can still have plenty of bad base spots and vice versa. So today I thought it'd be kind of fun to lean into that variation, and take a look at what, in my opinion, are the very best and worst base spots in each biome. We've quite literally got a lot of ground to cover today, so without further ado, let's get right into it. I can't lie, it's pretty hard to go wrong when you're basing in the safe shallows, but there are a few things you can look for. Ideally, it should be deep enough to comfortably fit a Cyclops and relatively close to some other biomes, because as much as I love the safe shallows, there's a lot of things you just can't get here, and if you build too close to the center, then even just accessing the rest of the map can get a bit tedious. Luckily, this spot solves both of these problems. It's plenty deep for easy navigation, and you're literally within spitting distance of 2 kelp forests and grassy plateaus. The biggest benefit to this spot though is easily the giant thermal vent. It and the caves it connects to are an excellent spot to get a bunch of early game sandstone, and the vent itself is a really good source of power once you hit the mid game. I always forget about this random part of the safe shallows that's right next to the crash zone for some reason, and after taking a look around, I'm happy to say I wasn't really missing out on much. Aside from the fact that the radiation makes this spot completely useless until after you get a radiation suit, there just really isn't a reason to live here. It's very isolated, and you have to cover a lot of ground if you want to get to the rest of the map. And compared with the rest of the safe shallows, this area is pretty barren and honestly kind of ugly. It's definitely far from the worst spot we'll be looking at today, but in a biome that has so many other good options, this is a pretty pathetic showing. The kelp forest is another one of those biomes where building is really hard to screw up. I like this spot because it's large enough to fit a decently sized base without you feeling like you're pressing up against the edges of the biome, and all the little canyons and caves make this one of the most interesting spots from a terrain perspective. Like with the safe shallows, a base here has to be practical, and this spot happens to sit on a near quadruple point between the safe shallows, kelp forest, grassy plateaus, and mushroom forest, so accessing the rest of the map shouldn't be much of a problem. I say it's pretty hard to screw up building in the kelp forest, but there is one spot that is just legitimately terrible. This spot right here in the southwesternmost biome. It's so bad because it sits right next to the crash zone, and there's a reaper that'll just mosey on over here from time to time, and probably make your life a living hell while he's at it. It's also just really remote, small, and irradiated, but let's be honest, the problem's mainly the reaper. The grassy plateaus are a bit of an odd one. The entire biome's decent, if not pretty good for building, but given how similar everything is, there isn't really one spot that's particularly great. I've talked about this big pit in the past, and it's definitely the region's most notable feature, but it also sits in what I'd consider the worst of the 4 grassy plateau biomes, since half of it borders the crash zone and Crag field, so the practicality isn't quite as good. Luckily, an area to the northwest proved to be a bit better. Like most of the grassy plateaus, it looks reasonably nice, but more importantly, it also sits on a sort of quadruple point, being within viewing distance of the safe shallows, kelp forest, and an entrance to the Jellyshroom caves. And hey, look at that, we're back over by the crash zone again. Now I will say you're not in any imminent risk of dying with this one, but that's pretty much where the positives end. The view's terrible. If it weren't for the small patches of grass, it'd be hard to tell you were even in the grassy plateaus, and the only nearby biomes are the Crag field and crash zone, so trying to get to the actually good parts of the map is gonna take you a little while. Tucked away in the southeastern corner of the Jellyshroom caves is a spot that's so good I'm kind of mad I never knew about it. You've got this giant land bridge, which looks really cool and gives you a bunch of flat land to build on, which is not something the Jellyshroom caves have in abundance. Getting in and out is also surprisingly easy, since you're pretty much directly below the southwestern entrance, and that giant bridge you're building on just so happens to be directly over the second best thermal spots in the entire game. So not only does this place look really cool, but once you unlock the thermal plant, you'll literally never have to worry about getting power ever again. As for the worst spot, it's nothing I would consider too bad, but you're just kind of in a random, boring pit in the middle of nowhere. Not really much to do or see here, and you're also pretty far away from many of the cave entrances, but that's pretty much it. You know, I've talked about the big mushroom tree in the past, but I think I've got a new favorite spot, and it's right above this big trench in the northwestern biome. One of the things that can make building in the mushroom forest difficult is that the actual forests themselves are really dense and hard to fit a base in, while the big clearings are pretty boring. But with this spot, you still get the trees while having room for a pretty decently sized base. You're also ridiculously close to the kelp forest and safe shallows, so getting anything you need from there isn't going to be a problem. But this isn't even close to this spot's best feature, because once you get far enough in the game to activate it, that big trench connects directly to the portal network, meaning in addition to the kelp forest and safe shallows, you'll also gain near instant access to the mountains, Bulb Zone, Lost River, Inactive Lava Zone, Lava Lakes, and Crag Field. I don't know why you'd ever want to go to the Crag Field, but hey, it's an option. Now, I want you to think about everything you love about the mushroom forest. Maybe it's the beautiful flora, the calm atmosphere, the great resources. It all sounds nice, right? Well, what if there was a place that had absolutely none of that? Welcome to a little spot I like to call the Mushroom Forest Hook. A random piece of land jutting into the crash zone that the developers decided to make part of the mushroom forest because why the heck not? Honestly, if it weren't for the slight blue tint to the water, you wouldn't even be able to tell you were in the mushroom forest to begin with. The radiation, camera shaking, and local Reaper Leviathans certainly don't care, making this spot essentially just the crash zone with slightly less murky water. The bulb zone has two problems that usually make it kinda problematic for base building. It's pretty remote, and the whole place gets really dark at night. This spot more or less solves both of these. You're pretty high up, so you'll end up getting more sunlight for longer, and you're really not that far away from the kelp forest and grassy plateaus. The only thing this place doesn't have going for it is that it is kind of barren, at least when compared to some of the other spots in this biome, but most of these are a lot more remote, and I feel like sacrificing a small amount of aesthetics for a load of extra convenience is definitely worth it. If you're looking for a place that isn't convenient though, might I suggest you check out this spot. It's pretty much as far to the northeast as you can get, and not only is it super far away from the rest of the map, but you can't even take a direct route to get out of here, at least not if you don't want to head through the mountains and deal with a Reaper. This makes an already long trip even longer, all for a location that's nothing to write home about. Before we move on, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game on the market, and you can play it for free right now on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile. War Thunder's fantastic graphics, original sound design, and riveting gameplay all combine to create an immersive experience like no other. One of my favorite things about War Thunder is the absolutely insane levels of detail. Important components such as crew, weapons, engines, and fuel tanks are all individually modeled and can suffer varying levels of damage, forcing you to change tactics on the fly. With over 2,500 vehicles from 10 major nations, including battleships, tanks, fighter jets, and more, War Thunder has something for everyone. Combine this all with War Thunder's homegrown Dagger engine, and you'll be enjoying high frame rates and great visuals from even lower-end devices. So join a community of over 95 million players by checking out the links in the description or pinned comment. For a limited time, new and returning players after 6 months on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox will receive a free bonus pack, including 100,000 Silver Lions, 7 days of premium account, multiple premium vehicles, and the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor. So don't waste any time and go check out War Thunder today. When looking for the best spot in the Crash Zone, there was one clear answer: the Crash Zone Mesas. Very few people even know about these, and they're the one spot in Subnautica's largest biome where you can actually find a decent bit of life. They're also really not all that hard to get to, especially this easternmost one, and that works out quite well because this mesa also happens to be completely Reaper free, so you can enjoy the cool aesthetic with virtually no risk. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say this is the single worst spot in this video, and maybe in the entire game. Let's start with the obvious. You're on the far side of the Aurora, which means to even just get back to the rest of the map, you're gonna have to go on a long trip through the most dangerous section of water that isn't the Void. You also can't see any of the Reapers, which would probably be the one reason anyone would ever want to come back here, and since you're right up next to the Aurora, you're gonna have to put up with your screen constantly shaking. From the biggest biome in the game to one of its two smallest, the best location on the mountain island is pretty much exactly where you'd think. Not only is this the only real piece of flat land on the entire island, but since it's the part you were meant to visit first, it's also the most convenient, being just a short swim away from the kelp forest and the rest of the shallows. You also aren't too far away from being able to access the teleporter network, so that's pretty nice. This is where I have to make the distinction between a spot that's cool and a spot that's actually good. Is a base at the very top of the mountain island cool? Well, of course. You're literally at the top of the tallest point that isn't the Aurora. But in terms of real-world practicality, this spot's about as bad as it gets. Aside from the fact that there's obviously no way to have a moon pool, even just getting up here is an absolute pain, since you've got to climb all the way up the natural footpaths before you can even get to the entrance. Okay, this might be a little hypocritical of me after I was just talking about cool versus actually good, but this spot is so freaking neat I just had to include it. For starters, this spot's right in between two Reapers, which on its own would already be pretty rare and cool, but it gets even better, because you get far enough in the game and one of these guys shows up, meaning this spot has the potential for an extremely rare triple Leviathan observatory. It's also not actually as inconvenient as you might think. You're pretty close to the border of the bulb zone, and there's a lost river entrance directly to your southwest. For the worst spot, I could have just gone to the far north and called it a day, but I think I've found something even worse. A cave. I didn't know this for the longest time, but the mountains actually has a proper cave network, and some of these chambers are really large. The problem is they're remote and kind of hard to get to with all the Reapers, and once you do make it down here, you realize it's just kinda boring. Not much happens down here, and though I will concede that it looks really cool once you light everything up, I just feel like staying in here for any major length of time would probably get old fast. I absolutely love the northern blood kelp. It's something I've said before and will most certainly bring up again. In the past, I've mostly talked about this area in the main chamber, which is cool, don't get me wrong, but after poking around a bit, I found a spot that's even better. Right here, between the two stacks of floating islands, is probably my new favorite spot in the entire game. To start, it's shallower, safer, and less remote than its main chamber counterpart, but I could care less about all that, because what I do care about is the view. This is the best looking spot in the entire game, and I will die by that statement. Every single direction has something different and interesting to offer, and as for this, well, there's nothing else in the game that even comes close. The worst spot in this place is very straightforward. At the far north, there's a large swath of land where the blood kelp and cool terrain just stop, and you're left with this really big patch of sandy nothingness. The worst part among all this has to be the giant peninsula in the northeast. Here, you get the joy of being surrounded by almost nothing on one side and absolutely nothing on the other three. Combine this with a spot that literally gets pitch black at night, and a multi-minute trip to even have a chance at seeing the rest of the map, and I hope you can see why you would not want to live here. Choosing the best spot for the underwater islands was very easy, since there's really only one island that's big enough for a decent-sized base. I've talked about this spot before, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but the main things you need to know are that it's close to the safe shallows, looks really cool, and the best thermal spots in the entire game are right below you, so you basically have free power. The worst spot here is really close by, but your quality of life will go down a lot. This is pretty much the deepest surface biome that isn't the blood kelp, so even during the day it's already pretty dark. The seafloor itself also just doesn't have much going on, especially in this little divot, so your view's gonna be pretty boring. Also, have fun getting your prawn suit up and out of here every single time you want to go somewhere. The dunes were another tricky one. It's a very large biome, yes, but most of it is very barren, and after looking around the entire thing, there were really only 3 spots that stood out. The small hourglass-shaped sinkhole, the main sinkhole, and the giant meteor crater. I've already talked about the hourglass sinkhole, and the meteor is actually quite boring once you're in the crater, so that leaves the main sinkhole. This is honestly a pretty good spot. It's big and open, so there's plenty of room for building, it's one of the few spots in the dunes with some actual life, there's plenty of thermal vents for some supplemental power, and the Reaper here is usually not right on top of you, which can make getting in and out of the base a lot easier. The worst spot here occupies yet another one of the game's many peninsulas. It's small, stupidly remote, and really deep, which are all things you've probably come to expect at this point, but it also has one more downside. You might think it'd be pretty safe, since Reapers tend to be more towards the center of the biome, but this spot happens to have a Reaper that just perfectly blocks your way out. And since the other sides are just void, that means you pretty much have to go through it anytime you want to visit or leave the base. For the Blood Kelp Trench, you can obviously build across the canyon, but if you want something a bit further down, you're going to want to try and find somewhere with a decent bit of flat ground. Just going off sheer convenience, I'd say this area is the best, but if you're okay taking an extra 10 seconds to get to your base, you can go directly below this ledge into this really cool cave. It's pretty big and flat, so there's loads of space to build, and the massive blood roots give the area a really unique look. It honestly reminds me more of some of the areas in Below Zero, and with how good that game looks, that is most definitely a compliment. Moving on to the bottom of the trench, there's two different ways you can go. Right brings you down into the Lost River, but to the left, there's what can only be described as a really big hole. I have absolutely no idea why it's here, it has basically nothing, save for a few resources and a scanner room fragment? How the heck did that thing get down here? Anyway, it's also probably the single darkest spot in the entire map, since there's obviously no sunlight, and not much in the way of bioluminescent flora. Whatever this hole's purpose, it certainly ain't for building, so if I were you, I'd pack up my things and look elsewhere. I feel like the Sea Treader's Path is one of Subnautica's more forgotten biomes, especially the part to the east that doesn't actually have any sea treaders. And that's kind of a shame, because while it's certainly not the most visually stunning place, it still looks a lot nicer than somewhere like the dunes or the Sparse reef, while still giving you lots of open space to build. I chose this spot because you have a couple of cool caves nearby, and much more importantly, you're still right next to the Blood Kelp Trench, so heading deeper and even getting back to the shallows shouldn't take you too long. A place that you certainly shouldn't be building is on the northern edge of the main part of the Sea Treader's Path. Building on the main path does seem like it'd be a good idea in theory, since you'd get to take advantage of the sea treaders for infinite shale, but for some reason building bases along these paths seems to kinda mess with the sea treaders spawning, and once the nearby ones clear out, you don't have any new ones showing up, which leaves the whole place feeling really empty. This spot does have a little extra bit of pain though, since you're just close enough to the dunes for there to be a Reaper that will occasionally come and mess with you. The Sparse Reef isn't somewhere I'd really want to live full time, but if I was gonna do it, I'd probably live here. What's cool about this spot is how you're right in between both the shallower areas to the north and the deeper ones to the south, and it makes it pretty darn easy to get to both. Also, in a biome that isn't exactly known for its stellar beauty, the tall rock formations here are actually pretty cool, and it would make for a pretty good view. I would have gone in the Sparse Reef Trench for this one, but that spot's actually pretty good for resources, so instead, I went with a small cave in the southwest. This place's entire purpose is just to lead you down to one of the small alien caches, and aside from that, it's really just a small remote spot with not much in the way of resources or anything to do. I know I've talked about this spot before, but you know what? I don't care. I'll stop bringing it up when it stops being good. In case you haven't seen my last base location video and don't know what the heck I'm talking about, this pillar in the Grand Reef is really cool, because just like the spot in the mountains, it's a spawn point for one of these guys, which naturally makes it an amazing spot for an observatory. It's also surprisingly convenient. It may not look like it, but you're only around 120 meters from the Sparse Reef, and from there, the main shallows are only a biome away. Honestly, this whole archway is pretty good. There's a ghost leviathan near the other side, so if you're fine with taking a bit more risk, you can build somewhere in the middle and have a sort of dual-purpose ghost leviathan and sea emperor base. Or you can go all the way down and fully commit to the ghost. Moving over a kilometer to the southeast, man, the Grand Reef is big, we arrive at the region's worst spot, which is yet another derelict sea treader spot. When you think about it, it's kind of odd that more than half of the actual sea treader paths run through the Grand Reef, and not the biome named after them, but whatever the reason, they're the worst spots in the sea treader's path, and they're also the worst spots here. The deep Grand Reef's usually somewhere I write off in these sorts of videos as being too similar to the actual Grand Reef to get its own distinct mention, but I decided to give it another chance, and you know what? I was wrong. This place is really cool. It does sort of have the same problem as the Jellyshroom cave, that being that it's kind of hard to find somewhere flat to build that isn't just in some back-end corner. This is most certainly not helped by the fact that the Grassy took what was easily the best spot in this place, but after searching around, I think this spot's still pretty good. It's got a cool little land bridge, which I like, it's pretty close to one of the cave exits, and unlike the Grassy, you've also got this nice little cluster of thermal vents for some extra power. I never knew this before now, but the deep Grand Reef isn't actually limited to the main cave. Some of the trenches and deeper areas off to the west also count, and that's where we are now. Honestly, there's nothing inherently wrong with this spot, it's just a bit remote and barren, especially when compared to some of the other cool spots this place has to offer, but in the grand scheme of things, I'd definitely say this is one of the better of the worst locations. When I was putting this video together, there were a lot of biomes, like the deep Grand Reef, that I kinda struggled to find bad spots for. The Crag field was not one of them, and if anything, I had the exact opposite problem. If you want to talk about a place that has zero redeeming qualities, it would be the Crag field. It's dark, remote, and chock full of the most annoying creature this game has to offer. The only even remotely interesting things about this place are a singular life pod that most people won't even bother with, and a really remote warp gate, which is probably the biome's best feature because it allows you to leave. I was honestly worried I was going to have to pick some random spot and then try to convince you that it's somehow worth spending any amount of time here, but then I got saved. I remembered there's this tiny part of the Crag field that comes up and borders some actually nice places. So while you probably shouldn't build here for any reason ever, if you are forced to live here, at least this spot will make it easy for you to leave. I'd count the entire rest of the biome as the worst location if I could, but since I have to pick a specific spot, I decided to go with the southwest corner. Back here, you've got virtually no room, there's only one angle where you get an even mildly interesting piece of terrain, not that you'll be able to see anything once the sun goes down, and most importantly, it's the spot with the most crag fields sitting between you and somewhere actually good. Before we head down super deep, let's take one more look at somewhere nice and sunny. I feel like most of the time when people are building here, they usually go for this big moon pool looking structure, but I actually think the nearby cove's a bit better. It's a lot more convenient when you're trying to park a Cyclops, you get an actual ocean view in addition to the rest of the island, and this little land bridge makes for a really cool structure to build off of. But probably my favorite thing about this spot has to do with the surrounding environment. Normally, when you're building a base and you want to grow some land plants, you either have to do it inside or up on some foundations on the surface. But if you follow this small footpath, you'll run into the small abandoned farm built by the Grassy. You can't actually plant anything in these grow beds, but you can clear them out with a propulsion cannon and then add in your own ones, almost like you're repairing them, which makes for a really cool and unique little farm spot. I really wouldn't recommend building on top of either of the mountain peaks. Like with the top of the mountain island, you're faced with a really long climb anytime you want to get in and out of the thing, and even worse than that, both of these mountain tops are already occupied, so you really don't have much space to work with. I suppose if someone were to make a base connecting the two mountain peaks, that'd be pretty cool though. Heading down to the Lost River now, we arrive, to the surprise of absolutely no one, at the Giant Tree Cove. This place's resources, good thermal vents, and sheer beauty would, on its own, make this a pretty good spot for a main base. What I realize though is that most people probably aren't going to want to fully set up in the Lost River, and that's why I think this spot really shines as an outpost. Since it's so remote, it's the perfect spot to build a small base to recharge and refuel, serving as a nice little reprieve between the chaos of the main Lost River and the inactive lava zone. Having these good thermal vents also means a base here would be pretty much maintenance free, and while you're waiting on those power cells to recharge, you've still got yourself one heck of a view. The Lost River has a lot of stuff vying for your attention, and with everything there is to see and do, it can be pretty easy to overlook the ceiling directly above your head. But if you happen to be looking up in the bone fields, or let's be honest, you built a scanner room nearby, then you might have noticed the entrance to a small cave. It's pretty fun to poke around, but as cool and novel as it is, I pity anyone who tries to build a base up here. It's insanely tight, hard to connect up the different layers, and just like any cave, not much happens here, so it's gonna get boring quick. The inactive lava zone's easily one of the coolest looking biomes, and if you're looking for something that balances practicality and style, I'd definitely go for the cracked lava fields in the northeast. The terrain itself looks really cool, but it's also quite flat, giving you plenty of room to fit a large base. The other great thing about this spot is just how well positioned it is. A base down here is obviously going to be a bit more on the remote side, but directly to your west is an entrance to the lava lakes. Heading a bit north from there will take you on a path to the Lost River, and you're also within 200 meters of an entrance to the lava castle, so getting to it, and by extension the teleporter network, is pretty dang easy. The bottom of the lava castle looks pretty cool, but from a practicality standpoint, it's pretty bad. There's obviously no way to take your Cyclops in here, so you'd have to just leave it outside, and taking your prawn suit through the lava castle tubes isn't exactly the most fun thing in the world. There's really only kyanite and crystalline sulfur in here, so even if you are using the teleporters, you'd still have to leave any time you wanted to mine anything, which would almost certainly get very annoying. And even though all the lava does look really cool, with all the white interior walls, it can make the inside of your base almost uncomfortably bright, and you might legitimately get a headache if you stay here for too long. The lava lakes are admittedly quite small and don't have a whole lot of spots to choose from, so a spot on one of these middle islands is probably about as good as you're gonna get. At least there's plenty of room to spread out, it does look pretty nice, and you are right next to the primary containment facility, which again gives you access to the teleporter network, but apart from all that, there really isn't much to say about this spot. Take an already empty biome and move into a random back corner that you were clearly never meant to seriously explore, and you get this base. At least you know a sea dragon's probably never going to come all the way back here to attack you, but with it being so out of the way and not having much in terms of resources or even a good view, there really isn't anywhere in here that's worse to build, so it takes the low spot. And finally, we arrive at the game's most dangerous biome, the Ecological Dead Zone. This is the one biome where I'm going to bend the rules of the video ever so slightly. Obviously, the best base location here is going to be somewhere right off the edge of the map, where you can easily connect back up to the mainland, but that's both really obvious and not a single location, so I want to talk about somewhere else. We usually think of the Void as a big expanse of ocean with absolutely no land to be found, but that's not entirely the case. Take a look at the Subnautica depth map. When you hit the Void, most of the terrain drops off as you'd expect, but for some reason, there's a few spots out here with actual terrain. And the coolest of these is a little spot southeast of the crash zone that I like to refer to as the Void Spike. It may be insanely difficult to get down here and establish a base in survival, but if you can pull it off, getting to live on this little shard of terrain that pierces through the void is a look and feel you can't get anywhere else in the game. Oh right, I have to do a worse spot too. Alright, we'll do 8,000 meters north, 8,000 meters east, and 8,000 meters down. Have fun getting a base out there! Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. You can play it for free today on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile devices using the links in the description or pinned comment. And if you're new or haven't played in the last 6 months, you'll also receive a massive bonus pack on PC and console that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. It's only available for a limited time, so don't miss it.